What's up my fellow gamers out there? You guys know that I love handheld consoles, and in this video I want to talk about the Sega Game Gear. This little device has been released in 1990 by Sega, and on paper it knew everything to beat the Game Boy. It had a colored screen, and a lot of games has been ported from the Master System. So on the go you can play Sonic, Chuck Rock, Columns, and a lot of very popular games which was popular on the Master System. But it doomed. Why? I'm going to tell you everything about it in this video. We're going to play it a little bit and we're going to compare it to the Game Boy. So sit back, relax, let's see why this little device is destined to fail. In 1990, Sega tried to do what everyone wanted, put full color console gaming in your hands. The result was the Game Gear, a sleek futuristic handheld with a color screen, a backlight and the power of a Sega Master System. But for all its flash, it was also a power-hungry beast. While Nintendo's Game Boy conquered the world, Sega's handheld fizzled out after selling just about 10 million units, compared to the Game Boy's family staggering 119 million units. So how did the prettier, more powerful system lose so badly? Goddamn, that stewardess was creepy as hell. The Game Gear was basically a portable Sega Master System. It used the same Zilog Z80 processor running at about 3.6 MHz and could display up to 32 colors on screen from a palette of over 4000. It had a 3.2-inch color backlit LCD screen, a mono speaker and even stereo output through headphones. I had to say that this is pretty impressive for 1990. Games came on small cartridges and the system could even be connected to a TV tuner accessory to watch live television, something Nintendo's Game Boy could only dream of. On paper, this was a handheld gamer's dream, bright, colorful and futuristic. But there was one fatal flaw baked right into its design. To power all that color and backlighting, the Game Gear needed 6 AA batteries, and even with all of them fresh and fully charged, you only get about 3 to 5 hours of gameplay, while the Game Boy ran on just 4 AA batteries and could last to 10 to 15 hours on a single set. This is crazy. That's over 3 times the battery life while using fewer batteries. And yeah, rechargeable batteries were an option in the 90s, but they were expensive and the capacity was not that great compared to the disposable alkaline batteries. Sega offered a rechargeable battery pack for this issue, a big belt-clipped external battery pack that connected via cable and offered roughly 4 to 5 hours of playtime. It wasn't very portable though, it looked like you were wearing a small brick on your hip. Okay, nowadays we are carrying power banks, but those are much more slimmer and lighter. So, while Game Gear players were hunting for wall outlets, Game Boy owners were still happily grinding through Tetris or Mario Land on the same batteries all weekend. It's a perfect example of Sega chasing performance while Nintendo chased practicality. To be honest, I prefer the design of the Game Gear to Game Boy. It looks more futuristic and somehow cooler. Okay, the Game Gear was also bigger, wider, thicker and heavier. But to be fair, the original Game Boy is not really pocketable, and if you wanted to carry it around, you needed a small bag for it too. Meanwhile, Nintendo doubled down on portability, releasing smaller revisions like the Game Boy Pocket and Game Boy Color, keeping the same basic design, efficient and affordable. Here, I made a comparison with some of my handheld consoles. Unfortunately, I do not have an original Game Boy to make a comparison, but you can see how it compares to the DSi XL, the original Nintendo Switch, and to the Steam Deck. Despite the battery woes, the Game Gear did have some real gems. You got colorful versions of Sonic the Hedgehog, Columns, Shining Force, Defenders of Oasis and even Aladdin, which took closer to the Genesis version than the Game Boy's simple port. The problem was that many of these were Master System ports, so while they looked good, there wasn't much unique content you couldn't already play elsewhere. Okay, but to be fair, you couldn't take your Master System to a car trip and play Sonic in the backseat. Game Gear was an option for this. Nintendo, on the other hand, had system sellers: Tetris, Super Mario Land, Pokémon, The Legend of Zelda, Link's Awakening, games that defined an entire generation. That difference in library strength is what kept the Game Boy alive for nearly a decade longer. By the end of its run, Sega sold about 10.6 million Game Gears worldwide. That's not bad, but if you compare to Nintendo's Game Boy and Game Boy Color combined sold around 118 million units, Sega's handheld just couldn't keep up, not with its short battery life, high cost and limited library. Still, it carved out a special place in gaming history. the first truly mainstream color handheld consoles, a year before Nintendo's Game Boy Color arrived. Today, the Game Gear is a collector's favorite. Many units suffer from fading capacitors or dim screens, but with modern recaps and backlight mods, they can look better than ever. There's a good community on Reddit, and lots of guys are changing the screen to IPS panels and upgrading the speakers too. Also, you can buy rechargeable battery packs, but nowadays, a strongly rechargeable AA battery is an option too. Playing on the original screen nowadays is a bit rough. Not just because our eyes are used to AMOLED screens. I had the Game Gear when I was around 12 and I noticed the same issues with the screen as I just notice it nowadays. That in the daytime it was quite difficult to see what is going on the screen, but to be fair, it's playable, so it's nothing bad here. Sega's Game Gear proved that power and color aren't everything. In the handheld wars, practicality beat performance and Nintendo walked away with the crown. But for those who love Sega's bold experiments, the Game Gear remains a beautiful, battery-hungry piece of history. I hope that you enjoyed this video about the history of Game Gear. If you love retro games and consoles, we got plenty more adventures ahead, so press start and subscribe to join the quest. The algorithm has dug up a couple of more relics for you, they're right here on the screen waiting to be discovered. I'm glad you stopped by, and I can't wait to see you on the next backlog quest.